My name is Drake Zimmerman. I chair RAM Global, the Rotary Action Group on Malaria. This has been a challenging and exciting year for malaria. We've had several breakthroughs. One, we found that using community health workers trained and equipped in malaria, we can take malaria way down, even to zero, and keep it there. Secondly, we've had Rotary International step up and provide its first ever program of scale $2 million grant, which got matched, so it's now $6 million to train community health workers to lower malaria, and that's in the country of Zambia. Thirdly, there are vaccines that have now come through that work on malaria. We used to joke that vaccines were always 5 years in the future, but we didn't know when to start counting. Well, we can start counting now, thanks to the vaccines coming forward. Let me take you on a round-the-world trip interviewing various people that Rotarians are working with on malaria. The first is an interview done by past District Governor Di Mason with Dr. Michael Good, who works at Griffiths University in a RAM Australia, a Rotary-supported malaria vaccine program. Over to Di.
G'day, my name is Di Mason. I'm a member of the board of RAM Global, and I have the pleasure of talking with Professor Michael Good on the subject of malaria vaccines. Professor Michael Good heads the Laboratory of Vaccines for the Development World at the Institute for Glycomics at Griffith University on the Gold Coast, Queensland in Australia. Professor Good's interests are in the field of immunity and immunopathogenesis, and I hope I said that correctly, to malaria and Group A streptococcus, with relevance to the development of vaccines. In 2008, Professor Good was awarded the Order of Australia for his services to medical research, and in 2009, he received the Eureka Prize for Leadership. In 2010, Professor Good was a recipient of the Queensland Greats Award and was elected Fellow of the Australian Academy of Health and Medical Sciences in 2015. Professor Michael Good, welcome, and thank you for being part of our series on malaria at the Rotary International Convention in 2021. Michael, malaria has been a disease that's been around for a very long time. While there are successful and necessary intervention activities against the spread of the disease, a vaccine would be a critical and necessary advancement for its eradication on Earth. Could you please tell us how you became involved in the work with the PlasProtect vaccine?
Thanks very much, Di, for the question and the introduction. I've been working on malaria all my working life, essentially, from when I started working on the parasite in 1986 in America at the National Institutes of Health. In those days I was working on what are called subunit vaccines, or trying to understand the immune response to malaria, focusing on individual proteins, and it became clear to me that the parasite was very adept at avoiding immunity to an individual induced by an individual protein. The parasite essentially changes its coat and does so very rapidly, such that no two parasites in the universe are actually identical, which is quite phenomenal, really. And it became clear to me after doing a lot of research in this area that the best approach to making a malaria vaccine was really to use as many different proteins in the parasite as we possibly could. And the simplest way to get there was, in fact, to use the whole parasite. So PlasProtect had its origins in that background. And when I came to Griffith University back in 2010, we had just published a paper with support from the Australian Rotary Health Research Fund, which was the first study to look at using the whole parasite in an animal model to vaccinate a mouse and induce immunity. So we took infected red cells from an infected mouse, essentially ground those up, mixed them with what's called an adjuvant, which is something that non-specifically revs up the immune system, injected those into mice, and we got some significant protection. It wasn't as high as what we would have liked, but it was good protection nevertheless. I then came to Griffith University from the Queensland Institute of Medical Research with the goal to continue and expand those studies. Having been funded initially from, as I said, the Australian Rotary Health Research Fund. And then my senior research fellow, Dr. Daniel Stanisic, was speaking at a RAM conference and was approached subsequently after that by members of the malaria vaccine project committee in Rotary, including Graham Jones and Sam Damani. and other people, and I think yourself as well, Di. And that actually led to a very fruitful collaboration between our local Rotarian groups and Griffith University. And that is the origins of the PLAS Protect. And what the funding from Rotary has done, which has been augmented by matching funds from the Australian government, which we wouldn't have got if it wasn't for the money from Rotary, has enabled us to develop this concept of what we call a whole parasite vaccine and take it into clinical trials. So we, of course, had to demonstrate, first of all, in animals, laboratory animals, that we could get a really good protective immune response, better than we were getting back in 2010. And the way we did that was to actually chemically modify a living malaria parasite, which we grew in the laboratory. And a lot of credit goes to Dr. Daniel Stanisic for doing this, growing the malaria parasite in the laboratory and making what we call a cell bank. So we could actually freeze them away and then bring them out when we wanted. And when we use those parasites, we could then treat them with a drug which would bind their DNA and stop the parasite dividing. So what we had a malaria parasite inside human red cells, which looked like a malaria parasite, but it couldn't grow. But what it could do is when it administered to either an animal or indeed to human volunteers, and I was one of those volunteers, could induce an immune response in those volunteers to the parasite itself. So the person or the animal who was exposed to the treated malaria parasite thought they were getting the immune response, thought this is a real infection, so we better develop a potent immune response. And now you've got an immune response which is developing not just to a single protein like we have in the RTSS vaccine, for example. We can talk more about that, but we're talking about immune responses to the entire parasite, all the 5,000 odd proteins within the parasite. And that's been a really game changer for us because there are so many proteins we're developing immune responses to. It increases our likelihood significantly that we'll be able to induce an immune response that can protect not against one strain, but against multiple strains. And we've demonstrated that in mice, in laboratory animals, that vaccine against one strain can protect against multiple strains of malaria, in fact, different species of malaria parasites. So this is what's got us excited. So that's called PLAS Protect. That's one of the forms of PLAS Protect, but it's a whole parasite vaccine. And now we're developing ways to translate this knowledge or this type of research into a field setting where we can take a vaccine like PLAS Protect, we'll take PLAS Protect to the field and have it developed in a form that it can be administered quickly and easily to many, many people. Because right now it's quite a labor-intensive process making the vaccine, but we're looking at ways to make the vaccine very quickly. In fact, to be able to dry it down as a powder and reconstitute it with water just prior to injection. So we've done that already in laboratory animals, but our goal now is to do that for human trials. So that's where Rotary has been phenomenal. I mean, without the support from Rotary, we wouldn't have got there. So we have the local Rotary branches at the Gold Coast, and we have, as I said in the past, support from the Australian Rotary Health Research Fund that's got us there. And a lot of it started with a presentation, as I said, at RAM about 2014.
Michael, that's excellent. I know you're going through phase 1 clinical trials at the moment. Would you care to just elaborate a little bit on where you are with that?
Sure, thanks, Di. So a phase 1 clinical trial, for those of you who may not be aware of the intricacies of clinical trials in humans, it's very different doing experiments, and rightly so, in humans compared to laboratory animals, because the primary concern is safety. A phase 1 trial is where you give a drug, or in this case, a vaccine, to a human volunteer, and that product has never before been given to a person. So the most important thing is always safety. The first thing is to do no harm. And then having established that it does no harm, obviously we want to demonstrate that the vaccine will induce an immune response. And having established that, we want to ask, will that immune response actually protect the person from the malaria parasite? So let's just go back to the safety issue. Because safety is a primary goal of a phase 1 trial, everything has to be prepared at a level of purity much, much greater than what is required for work in laboratory animals. And things have to be checked and signed off. We have to make the vaccine, we have to test it for a whole lot of things that we wouldn't have to worry about if we was putting the vaccine into mice, just to be doubly sure that what we're giving to the volunteers is we know exactly what it is and it isn't going to cause any harm. What that means in one sense is it's very expensive because there are lots and lots and lots of tests that we have to do for a human trial that make sure it's a safe product. And that's what we've done. So we've completed a small phase 1 study with PlasProtect, which is the form of the vaccine that I said before is quite difficult to prepare. We make it in the laboratory prior to administering it to the volunteers. And what we've been able to show is a couple of things. One is that vaccine does induce an immune response, quite a strong immune response, and similar to the immune responses that we have seen in laboratory animals who are protected from malaria. And that work was published in a leading international journal, of which Daniel Stanisic was the first author in 2018, called BMC Medicine. Having established that, and that it was reviewed by, as I said, an international panel and international reviewers who wrote an independent commentary about the vaccine, actually saying it was a significant step forward, which was, we were quite chuffed by that, of course. But having done that, well, then we are in a situation now where we are going to vaccinate people and actually give them a live malaria infection, not one that's been nobbled, but actually a live malaria infection. So this has to be done. Again, not only do we have to make sure the vaccine's safe, but we have to make sure that if the vaccine doesn't work or whatever, the volunteers are at no risk. So we have, in very close collaboration with senior doctors at the Gold Coast University Hospital, have a clinical trials unit at Griffith University, where volunteers can be given a malaria infection, and we can follow the course of the infection in their blood by using a very sensitive, what's called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR test, which many people may have heard about from watching crime shows on TV, for example. But it measures the DNA it measures DNA copies in the blood, and that we can tell when the parasite's growing and how fast it's growing, and we know at what level that parasite is likely to cause any sort of illness, and we can stop the infection by giving drug at the appropriate time. So we've done that in a small number of people, and we're very excited to see, and we haven't published this yet, but we have spoken about it at scientific meetings. We're very excited to see that some of our volunteers were completely protected from malaria. Not all of them were protected, that's true, but about half of them were completely protected from malaria. So this is the first time that I'm aware of that anyone's been completely protected from what we call a blood stage malaria infection. That's giving infected red cells to a person and asking, can their immune response to the vaccine protect them from disease? So we obviously have more work to do, and these are to make it work in everybody, but it's a very exciting development for us, and it gives us a lot of confidence moving forward. Don't forget, these people who we were vaccinating had never been exposed to malaria before. When we take this product to a field setting where we have children, for example, or young people who have some pre-existing immunity from their mothers and so on, or from prior exposure, we're very hopeful, but we'll find out, we're very hopeful that the vaccine will build on their pre-existing level of immunity and give them a very good response. So that's where we are now. But the next step, as I said, is to actually take this PlasProtect vaccine, which we manufacture in the laboratory at the time just before we give it to volunteers, and make it as essentially as a powder. And this is what we've done in mice, and it's working very, very nicely. And we're now transitioning that to a human study. And again, it'll go through a phase 1 study where, again, safety is the most important thing, because again, we're putting this reformulated powder into volunteers for the first time, using compounds which we know are safe and which have been given to humans before, but as that combination have not been given to humans before. So safety is, again, the primary concern. And again, funds from the local Rotary branch, of which you're a very active and supporting member, Di, has enabled us to embark on that trial.
Michael, in relation to PlasProtect, there are a couple of other vaccines which are already being trialed. One is the RTSS, and the other one's the R21 trial recently in Burkina Faso. How do you see this in relation to the work that you're doing with your vaccine?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So the RTSS and the R21, which are very closely related vaccines, they're very similar in many respects. The RTSS is far more advanced, of course. It was developed in the United States back in the late 1990s and has now been into tens of thousands of children in West Africa and East Africa. it attacks or prevents the infection at what's called the sporozoite stage, the form of the parasite inoculated by the mosquito. When the parasite's inoculated by the mosquito, it travels to the liver and spends about a week there. During that time, it doesn't cause illness. But when it comes out of the liver, it enters the blood, that's when it causes illness. So what we find with the what we find with the RTSS vaccine is it can prevent about 30 to 40% of infections in the first 6 months following vaccination. So that's important. And they're obviously trying to improve on that. And one way they're improving on that is to change by changing the configuration of the vaccine slightly. And that's what R21 is. It has more copies of what's called the antigen in the vaccine. And it has a different form of adjuvant, which is the non-specific rever-upper of the immune response, as I call it. So the R21 trial has just finished a phase 1/2B of a few hundred people. So it's early days yet, but the early data was published just recently in the Lancet, did demonstrate that it was looking superior to the RTSS vaccine. So we're very excited. The whole world's very excited by that, and I've written to the lead author and congratulated him on that study. But where that fits in with the Plas Protect is a very interesting question, and I think it's a very important question, but a very simple answer in my view. The R21 or the RTSS protects against the sporozoite stage, which is inoculated by the mosquito. Plas protects against the blood stage. So Plas Protect will be able to mop up, we believe, parasites which haven't been protected by the R21 or RTSS vaccine in the liver. As I said, it's about 30 or 40% protective RTSS, and so far the R21 is about 70% protective or 75% protective. Early days to be confident about those numbers, but it's looking good. So, but still, some people will get malaria. So we see a very important role for Plas Protect in protecting against the blood stage in those people who are not protected in the liver stage.
Michael, that's very interesting. Look, thank you very much for coming along and being subjected to this interview and taking part with us, of course. We wish you all very much with the Plas Protect vaccine, because basically my belief is that we really need a vaccine at the end of the day to be able to eradicate malaria from the world. And as we've seen such a change now with COVID-19 coming in and possibly getting a surge of malaria throughout the world as well. Thanks very much again. And thank you. And I'll finish the interview right now. Thinking the interview right now, but what I will say for some of the people there, for those seeking more information on this joint Rotary and Institute for Dichomics partnership, please visit the website at malariavaccineproject.com.
Thank you, Di. Excellent work. Now we'll turn to Tanzania, where Rotarian Faye Cran, who's also on the RAM Global Board, has done work on malaria for decades, working with Canadians, with Rotarians from the UK and elsewhere to drop malaria dramatically. Here's Faye. RAM Global has given Rotarian Faye Cran of Tanzania the highly coveted Superman cape for her tireless efforts in malaria. She joined the RAM Global Board this last year, and she's already coordinated several small grants and plans others. She's been a mainstay of malaria work in Tanzania. We're thrilled to have this force of nature working with us. So Faye Cran, Rotarian Faye Cran, is a member of the Rotary Club of Moshi, Tanzania. She's been the go-to person for many, many Rotary projects, including working with people with albinism, as in albinos, leprosy, physically and mentally challenged children, and of course, malaria. Thanks to her poultry farm, she is affectionately known as Mama Cuckoo, which is the sound that chickens make in Tanzania. She's worked with clubs, districts, whole countries, New Zealand, Canada, and with above all, with the United Kingdom's effort of REMIT to do grants small to large with huge impressive results. Her nearby area has the lowest malaria parasite rates in all of Tanzania. We would like to duplicate these efforts and these results in the rest of Tanzania. So I'm happy to give you Rotarian Faye Cran. How did you get started, Faye?
Okay, thank you, Drake, for such a nice comments. I don't know if I deserve it or not, but still, I enjoy doing my work. I first got involved with malaria when I first heard about it. It was about 1953 when I was a school child in Mombasa. and we had a medical health officer called Roosevelt. I still remember him. And we had a lot of people dying of malaria in Mombasa, many people, cerebral malaria as well as normal malaria. And he came in to clean up Mombasa, and he really did. My job, I used to get 20 shillings a week pocket money. My job was to go around the premises of my parents and make sure there's no utensils that would gather water, no tires, no coconut shells because we're in Mombasa, anything like that. And he had a team of people who used to come round, I think every week to the house, the premises, the gardens, and spray and check that we had mosquito fish in the water tanks because they gave us the fish for free. He made a very great impression on me as a young girl as I was then, maybe 13 years old. It really impressed me a lot. Even 12 years old, I think, even 9, I can't remember. Long time ago, anyhow. The next thing I heard about malaria was when I was in Arusha. I was president of the Red Club of Arusha when Brian Sewell was president of RIBI in England. And he decided his project was going to be malaria in Tanzania, Rotarians eliminating malaria in Tanzania. And he came out and asked me to be the coordinator. And funny enough, I mentioned this to my husband and told him about Roosevelt in Mombasa. He said, I remember that bastard. He found me. We had oil drums standing upright and the water was gathering around the rims. And the mosquitoes could breathe there. And he found me because we'd not got the drums lying down. So I was so impressed that, 50, 60 years later, people were remembering this man who'd only been with us for a few months in Mombasa. And it stuck in my mind. So when Brian started, that was when I really started following up on malaria because of what he taught me so many years ago.
Uh-huh. Yes, community cleanup is still part of what everybody does and what community health workers are organized to do. So would you describe what you've done there in Moshi area? Because you've got malaria down there.
Yeah, we started in Manyara, and then we went to Arusha, and then to Moshi. We just finished Moshi. What we do, we meet with the Ministry of Education are very supportive to us. And we meet with the children in the classrooms, show them video films, explain malaria. The parents also come, and we tell them the problem of what brings malaria, because malaria is brought by the mosquito. Many didn't know it. Some would say, you ask what brings malaria, and they say the rabbit dog. Other people say the rain. They really had no idea. So we have a questionnaire afterwards, having talked them all. And the child who wins, we have 5 winners. So the best 5 get these T-shirts marked winner on them. So of course that's all great fun. It's a very relaxed meeting. And maybe anything from 100 to 400 will turn up for that meeting.
All right. Well, Tanzania is known for its work with schools to distribute mosquito nets and education. So you've gotten a much greater impact there in the Moshi area, where your parasite rates are down to like 1%. This is in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro, I'm told.
That's right, yes. The best way is to stop the mosquito breeding, to keep the areas clean, to work with the communities, the children in the communities, rather than from people outside coming in, because I feel they're the ones who feel it, and especially the mothers. I mean, I've seen mothers who've lost their children with malaria and they're devastated. And when they see that there's a chance of doing it, they all make sure the areas are kept clean, rivers are kept clean, because otherwise people throw all their rubbish into the rivers, the water gets blocked up, mosquitoes start breeding. It's all a matter of stopping the mosquito breeding, as far as I feel.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing, Faye, and you keep up the great work with albinos, the children with challenges, helping the mothers, and especially helping with malaria. Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, Faye. Next, let's jump across the continent to interview Dr. Emma Bruce, who's the District 9101 Malaria Coordinator. She's on the RAM Global Board, and you'll really enjoy her presentation. Today, we have the great pleasure of interviewing Rotarian Dr. Emma Bruce of the Gambia. RAM Global Board member, Dr. Emma Bruce's energetic and insightful work in the Gambia shows how we Rotarians can lead efforts to get malaria to zero and keep it there. So please, over to
to you, Emma. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here.
Yes, thank you very much, Drake. I am Rotarian Dr. Emma Bruce. I'm the chairperson of the Malaria Subcommittee of District 9101, which comprises of 10 West African countries, Mali, Guinea, Senegal, the Gambia, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Sierra Leone, Liberia. And Ivory Coast. I hope I've not left anyone out. But yes, so I oversee the malaria activities for Rotary. Before I came into office about 3 years ago, for the fighting disease area, it was just polio that was taking the lead here in West Africa, in these 10 West African countries. So we can do in malaria to try to reduce the cases for malaria, because I am a medical doctor and I realize not much has been done through Rotary for our district for malaria. So I started first with a malaria march, which involved, it was during a district conference that we had in the Gambia, and I brought in the First Lady of the Republic of the Gambia. Such awareness has not been done, especially at a high level involving the Minister of Health, the Vice President, and the First Lady. So that was a big start. So not only did the Gambians see the politicians also involved in malaria prevention, raising awareness, but also the Rotarians from the 10 West African countries, it sparked their interest to start looking more into malaria and try to have more funds for malaria. So from there, I wanted to do more for malaria prevention in our district. I was advised to start small, start with my own country, the Gambia first. So with no funds anywhere, didn't know how to access RI funds, grants, or district grants. So I wrote to RAM Global, who directed me to the Rotarian Malaria Partners, which is now Malaria Partners International. So that's how we got our first small grant, which we started with. And that coincided with first the BedNet distribution campaign, which was cross-border with Senegal. So coming in, I was invited by the National Malaria Control Program of the Gambia and the Category Relief Service, who they're the two main bodies that do malaria prevention in the Gambia. So when we came in, they told us, we realized actually that Global Fund has reduced a lot of the funds that they've been sending to the Gambia for malaria. So, and they've lacked a lot in malaria educational campaign. And especially with the BedNet coming, we really need to teach. We're going to distribute I think 1.2 million BedNets. So we really need to teach the Gambian people the use of the BedNet, the importance of using it and taking good care of it. So that's how we started. So we decided to help with the radio campaign, where we hired the health communicators of the Minister of Health of the Gambia, who went to radio station all across the Gambia to educate the people of how to use the BedNet and how, because here sometimes people use the BedNet as garden fences or as walls in their houses, and it's very dangerous as garden fences because the insecticides, when it rains, it goes into the soil and goes into the food, and also they use it to cook sometimes. So we have to educate them all that the BedNets are not used for that; they're used to sleep under. So we try to do the radio campaign for that, and then also do the TV campaign for that, where we came a couple of times on TV. We joined hands with the National Malaria Control Program, with the Catholic Relief Services. Staff members of their organization came, and we had a 30 minutes panel discussion where they raised a lot of questions, a lot of questions were answered, and people get to know more of what malaria prevention is. And from there, we also did a big project, which was the traditional communication drama group. This involved getting local women from different villages, because not everybody in the Gambia has TV or radio. So we have very remote villages where they don't have access to TV or radio. So these traditional communication drama groups were made up of 10 women each, which will go from village to village to sing malaria songs and do sketches, drama performances of malaria prevention You know, an example was that where a man who has 2 wives, which is common practice in some religions here, would not allow the wife to take the sick child home to the hospital. So the mother tried to explain to the father that the child had these symptoms. So the drama was based on that, to help people to realize that malaria symptoms are not they're not due to any other kind of, you know, witchcraft or anything. They're actually disease. There's a disease, and that we teach them what the symptoms are. So when they see that symptoms, they can go to the nearest health center. So that was really big because we covered about 80 villages. It took over 2 weeks to do that. From there, we did we started another campaign, which was going to the health centers and hospitals, where we targeted pregnant women and children under 5, their mothers, because that's the most vulnerable group in malaria. When those people have malaria, is alarming. So the campaign was focused on going to each of these health centers during their antenatal clinic days for the pregnant women and pediatric outpatient days. And we'll get a drama group who will also do drama and sketches, because we realize just holding the mic and speaking about malaria prevention, people they will listen for a while, but then zoom out and like forget the message when they go home. So we tried to incorporate all the messages in a drama performance, which was really helpful because it made them laugh, it brought in humor, and it showed them the different misunderstanding and different negative behaviors that people have had towards malaria prevention, and try to teach them the good way of doing that. So that's what we started doing, and then the COVID came. We had to stop that because our mission was to go from hospital to hospital. So it became dangerous to do that. So we also have plans now to do with schools and the communities, but obviously with the COVID, we were not able to do that. So we had to scale down. So we are looking forward to also helping with the educational campaign for the SMC. SMC is where the National Malaria Control Program goes into the community and give children under 5 years old the prophylactic malaria medication. And so that's very important to encourage the parents to allow their children to take this prophylactic medication, especially now during the COVID season. Most of them are afraid of health workers going from door to door. So the National Malaria Control Program asks us to help with that as well. So we have that, and we also have the cross-border that we're working with Senegal. We're trying to see how we can bring in another project which trains community health workers who will become, they'll go from door to door and actively look for malaria cases and treat on the spot. They will be equipped with malaria medication and also a rapid kit test where they can do the treatment right away. And we see that that's going to be very effective because it's like actively looking for the malaria cases rather than waiting for patients to come. Because sometimes patients don't want to go to the hospital, especially now with the COVID. Sometimes the malaria symptoms, they just take it for granted. And obviously they can even spread that through the community. So we're looking forward to that. Hopefully that also materializes. And then also I'm the chairman of 10 West African countries, or the Rotary for malaria. So I'm also trying for the other 9 West African countries to also have funds, the small grants, which Rotarian Malaria Partners and the new name now, Malaria Partners International, and RAN Global have been so helpful. They've started giving small grants to, we already awarded Mali and Liberia small grants of $4,000 to start with malaria prevention activities. So they've just received the funds. So we're helping them also to put together a comprehensive package which will include training some health workers, also radio, TV programs, and community outreach programs. So we also hoping that the other the other 7 countries will also have a chance to receive a small grant, whether $3,000 or $4,000, so that they can also carry out malaria prevention program under the name of Rotary. So we're really trying to push Rotary's stand on malaria in my district, and we do hope for all your support so that we can make this happen. Thank you, Drake.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. So what are the specific roles that Rotarians play in this? You've outlined several. So would just summarize the roles that Rotarians play there.
Yes, us Rotarians here, we have a Rotarian committee, Rotarian Malaria Committee, and not just in the Gambia, all the 10 West African countries have Rotary Malaria Committee. So what we do is, first, what I started with mine in the Gambia, I organized a 2-day workshop where I brought in different speakers who would teach them, 1, what is malaria, 2, how do you effectively communicate malaria prevention, messages to the community, because Rotarians, they're not familiar with presenting health messages to the community. So we train them on that. So now what happens is when we go out in the field, go to hospitals, health centers, we have the drama group who will perform, and then us Rotarians will come after and talk also about, encourage the community about malaria prevention. And also during the BedNet distribution campaign, us, the Rotarians in the malaria committee, we went, we joined the National Malaria Control Program, going to some villages and also communities to distribute bed nets. So I'm trying for the Rotarians and the Rotary actors to be actively involved in also malaria prevention in their country, and also set up all these activities that we're trying to do for the community for malaria prevention. That's what the Rotarians are doing.
Okay. You talked about community health workers. How are you training community health workers in addressing malaria? Our training and equipping them is what various projects have been doing.
Yes, here in the Gambia, we've the Catholic Relief Service have done a pilot project. I think they're still on it; they've not finished. It was supposed to be for 2 years, I think, but I think the COVID slowed that down. So we're intending to do a cross-border, because Gambia, Senegal, they're so closely linked in terms of religion, culture, and people going in and out. So we realized if we have to fight malaria in both countries at the same time, if we do it one or the other, it will not be successful. So Senegal actually already has a head start over us in the Gambia. They've already had a bunch of community health workers trained and actually started the work. But here in the Gambia, no funds have been allocated for that. So we were, when Rotarian Jim Moore came to visit the Gambia in October 2019, that was one of the things we discussed. So we're looking forward to hopefully implement this program here. And like you said, Drake, it's very important. It's not just training them, it's also equipping them. Because even if we have a grant that just trains them, it's not really going to be useful, because we have to equip them with rapid test kits, with thermometers, with bicycles, with backpack, with the medication, for them to go from house to house to check these cases, and also like record devices that they will record all these cases. So it's a two-way street. So it has to be well planned. And also we're trying to bring in other partners like Catholic Relief Services, who have partners, who have their collaborative organization in Senegal, to see how they can also help us with the cross-border. So that's where we're at right now with the community health workers.
Emma, you just gave a very quick summary of how Rotarians are interacting with community health workers to train and equip them. And we're especially wanting to train them to do cross-border work where there are borderline areas. This is just, you nailed it. And what the Rotarian sponsorship goes for. We've got a program coming in that'll be $1,000 that Rotarians can sponsor a community health worker. And what it goes for, those rapid test kits, the medicines, the bicycles, the rain gear, and the other items that go. So what you said is that you also get people to do the outreach, to go to the last mile, to go test and treat them, to chase the cases, I think was a term that you used in another communication. So that's just absolutely fabulous what you're doing. Yeah. And then partnering with community.
Another important thing.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I was just gonna point out something. It's also important that the amount of community health workers we train, because just training a few, let's say we start with 100, it's a good start, but it will not really be effective. Although we did say that we can use those at where their peak malaria cases. But it will be nice if we have like a good size number that will actually make a difference, rather than just a few, maybe a couple of, 10, 20, 30. I understand it's about 100 that the target is for. So if we can get more grant, that will help train a lot more. If at least if we can get about 1,000, I know it's step by step. We get the funds, step by step, but if we can get up to 1,000, that will make a huge difference, because we don't want to start small and then it dwindles there and just stays there stagnant, and we cannot move to the next level. So I really want us to take the time and really plan it well, and like get good amount of grant to start, even if it's not that big, but start something substantial that will actually make an impact. We're very grateful to RAM Global that they have actually started now sponsoring and giving grants to some of these African countries, especially in West Africa, in my district, to help with malaria prevention through Rotary. So that's a big step, and it helps us achieve our goals here. So we would like to see more grants coming in from RAM Global, and also we would like to also help RAM Global to increase its membership to also reach further in the globe.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking your time on this busy afternoon, and for all of the work that you're doing, because you have like 7 projects going already.
Yeah.
So
yes.
This has been terrific.
Yes.
On behalf of RAM Global, we really appreciate all of your work, your energy, and you're a real role model for all of us. Thank you much.
Thank you, Dr. Emma. Now let's jump the Atlantic and spice things up. We go to Colombia, where Efrain interviews some Rotarians active in malaria there. Let's see what's going on in Colombia.
Reciban cordial saludo. La malaria representa un problema de salud público debido a que cerca del 85% del territorio rural colombiano está situado por debajo de los 1.600 metros sobre el nivel del mar, con condiciones climáticas y epidemiológicas aptas para la transmisión de esta enfermedad. De acuerdo con el Instituto Nacional de Salud de Colombia, en el informe Evento Malaria 2017, se tiene como dato que aproximadamente 25 millones de personas en el país se encuentran en riesgo de contagio en 5 regiones ecoepidemiológicas. Esas regiones son la región amazónica, andina, atlántica, orinoquía y pacífica. Estamos hoy aquí con 2 de los rotarios que están tratando de implementar el proyecto Global Grant 21-23-404 en Malaria Now, en la UNOPI 8, en la ciudad de Buenaventura, Colombia. Son ellos Rodrigo Díaz, actual presidente del Comité Distrital de la Fundación Rotaria Distrito 4281 y gobernador de este mismo distrito para el periodo 2022-2023. Y nos acompaña igualmente Diana Guevara, rotaria del Rotario Cali San Fernando, que lideró un proyecto de malaria hace 3 años en la misma zona con el Club Nuevo Cali y Buenaventura Pacífico. Iniciamos un conversatorio con estos 2 líderes y empezamos con Rodrigo. ¿Cuál es el objetivo del proyecto en Malaria Now?
Efraín, el objetivo es implementar un proyecto para erradicar la malaria en la región de mayor índice de la enfermedad en el municipio de Buenaventura, que sirva como piloto, posteriormente replicarlo en otros municipios de Colombia, aplicando a una subvención de Rotary de gran escala como la que fue entregada este año en Zambia.
¿Por qué seleccionaron la comunidad de UNOPI en Buenaventura específicamente para desarrollar este proyecto?
La razón por la cual se seleccionó la UNOPI 8 de Buenaventura es porque durante el año 2020 el distrito de Buenaventura reportó 1.273 casos de malaria y la región que más contagio presentó fue la UNOPI 8 con 260 casos. Esta UNOPI 8 la conforman 44 localidades o centros poblados de la zona rural, que en su gran mayoría se encuentran ubicadas en el margen de la vía Cali-Buenaventura. Esto hace que aumente la transmisión de contagio también a centros urbanos de mayor población, históricamente la principal zona malárica del distrito de Buenaventura. La población se ve bastante afectada porque el turismo es su actividad principal. Es una de sus mayores fuentes de ingreso y el temor es contagiar a los visitantes también. De los casos reportados durante el 2020, el 94%, o sea, 244 casos, corresponden a la malaria Plasmodium falciparum y presentándose mucho en niños y en mujeres embarazadas. Esta es una de las razones principales.
Bueno, Rodrigo, ¿por qué hablar de eliminar la malaria en la UNOPI 8 en Buenaventura? Si esta es una enfermedad que lleva muchos años en el mundo.
Mira, la malaria es una enfermedad prevenible y curable. Y tenemos unos muy claros ejemplos que nos animan a hacer esta afirmación. Paraguay fue certificado libre de malaria por la OMS en el 2018. Argentina fue certificado libre de malaria en mayo de 2019. Y más recientemente, El Salvador, en febrero de este año, después de 3 años de no presentar casos de malaria, es certificado libre de la malaria por la OMS. Por eso éramos nosotros que en Colombia podemos, a través de un programa como este en paralelo con el trabajo que está haciendo a nivel nacional y al nivel de la OMS, poder declarar libre de malaria después de aplicar la subvención. Ahora, obviamente tenemos que trabajar en conjunto con el Instituto de Salud de Colombia, con la escuela, la Secretaría de Salud Distrital de Buenaventura, el programa IREN, que está liderando la OMS a nivel nacional. Hemos estado conversando también con la Cruz Roja como el operador logístico del proyecto y con los lineamientos de RAM Global y los lineamientos del CADRE en su programa de tratamiento de enfermedades, podemos conseguir la prevención de la malaria y detener la transmisión.
Diana, ¿en qué lugar específicamente se va a desarrollar este proyecto?
Este proyecto, como les comenté anteriormente, se va a realizar en lo que se denomina UNOPI 8. Esto comprende unas poblaciones como Zaragoza, Bendiciones, Córdoba, el kilómetro 40, Gamboa, kilómetro 18 al 23, La Delfina, Cisneros, San Cipriano, y son zonas que las componen comunidades negras, indígenas y mestizos.
Rodrigo, la Global Grant en Malaria Now, en su estructura, ¿contará con un componente educativo?
Claro que sí, Efraín. Para nosotros es el componente que más importa en todo el proyecto. Se debe dirigir en 2 enfoques: educación para adultos y educación para niños. La educación para adultos es el hoy, es el que nos va a garantizar el trabajo en el proyecto durante el presente. Y la educación para niños es el mañana, es el que nos va a garantizar la sostenibilidad del proyecto a largo plazo. Ahora, vamos a trabajar con la comunidad directamente porque no podemos desarrollar clases magistrales a una población que no está acostumbrada a recibir clases en un salón de reuniones. Vamos a trabajar en la parte lúdica, vamos a trabajar en la parte de juegos que nos permita de una manera diferente de hacer que la comunidad se involucre dentro del proceso de capacitación y ganemos todos juntos para poder lograr el objetivo fundamental del proyecto.
Diana, en la fase diagnóstica y estructuración del proyecto hemos tenido un importante contacto con poblaciones que han sufrido el flagelo de la malaria. En su relación de la comunidad con ustedes, ¿sintieron que ellos requerían el apoyo de Rotary?
Por supuesto. Estas comunidades fueron visitadas hace pocos meses, alrededor de 3 meses, 2 meses. Se visitaron comunidades como Zaragoza, San Cipriano, Córdoba, y en cada una de las poblaciones siempre nos manifestaban la falta de toldillos, de una frecuente fumigación, de la falta de educación sobre malaria para ellos mismos aprender a manejar la enfermedad. Hubo un caso en el que se nos acercó una familia que la componen 6 personas y 5 estaban infectados de malaria. Hubo otra madre que se nos acercó, por ejemplo, y nos dijo que el hijo pues, tiene 22 años hoy en día y le ha dado 23 veces malaria. Entonces, hay otra razón muy importante y es que hay migración de indígenas del Chocó hacia el Valle del Cauca que también traen malaria. Hay un factor también de minería ilegal, en donde el manejo de los pozos, el movimiento de personal que está infectado también es una de las razones por las cuales ellos requieren tanto apoyo en el manejo de la malaria.
Diana, tú lideraste un proyecto importante de malaria con el apoyo de Rotary hace 3 años. Cuéntanos un poquito de esa experiencia con respecto a malaria específicamente.
Por supuesto. Ahí podemos observar en la pantalla un simposio que se realizó en Buenaventura, en el que tuvimos la participación de la Secretaría de Salud, Caucaseco, que es un centro de desarrollo e investigación especializado en malaria. Este evento se realizó en un auditorio en el Hospital de Buenaventura, que se convocaron alrededor de 300 personas. Allí hicimos un proceso de formación y de entrega de microscopios a microscopistas ubicados en zonas específicas en Zaragoza, Córdoba, San Cipriano y en zonas aledañas a Buenaventura. Parte de la actividad que se hizo en el 2017 fue entregar toldillos, llevar registros, hacer pruebas rápidas y hacer un poco de pedagogía a través de instituciones como nos acompañó en ese momento Caucaseco. Una experiencia bastante enriquecedora porque notábamos la necesidad que había en la comunidad para adquirir estos apoyos como los toldillos que pueden tenerlos, pero por ejemplo lo que se ve hoy en día es que no hay un buen manejo porque los lavan y los lavan mal. De pronto en el manejo de sus espacios, el manejo de basuras no es el idóneo. No hay capacitación ni programas para ellos, ni asistencia permanente de instituciones de salud en donde haya un permanente apoyo para aminorar esta problemática. Entonces, nuestra intención es poder dar continuidad al proyecto porque aquí tenemos un gran paso, no queremos perderlo y por supuesto requerimos del apoyo de todos los rotarios para poder llevar a cabo no solo en esta zona 1P8, sino en el futuro poder eliminar la malaria en el mundo.
Bueno, estamos llegando ya al fin de este conversatorio sobre malaria now y agradecemos la presencia de Diana y de Frigo y si alguno de ustedes quiere hacer unas palabras finales para rematar este conversatorio, lo agradeceríamos.
Bueno, este proyecto lo venimos trabajando desde hace ya 9, 10 meses. Nos hemos venido preparando suficientemente para montar un proyecto de gran envergadura y bien cimentado. Ahora estamos en la época de reconstitución de recursos. Es un proyecto de $150,000 y andamos por el orden de los 45 o 50% de ese valor. Sería interesante que las personas que les interese, que se enamoren del proyecto y quieran conocer más a profundidad, pues se contacten con nosotros y les comentamos el avance que vamos teniendo y cómo podríamos llegar a conseguir la Global Grant. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Efraín. Nuestra intención es poder dar apoyo a una región que realmente lo necesita. Podemos mejorar la calidad de vida de unas personas que viven en condiciones de pobreza extrema y que realmente requieren de formación y la están pidiendo a gritos para poder mejorar y evitar tanto contagio de malaria como hasta hoy se viene presentando. Agradecemos a los rotarios que quieran darnos el apoyo en este proyecto. Podemos aclarar todas las dudas que tengan cuando lo requieran y están bienvenidos todos a trabajar por esta razón en Colombia, en nuestro Pacífico colombiano.
En Malaria Now es posible lograrlo con la ayuda de ustedes. Muchas gracias por su atención y esperamos su apoyo.
Gracias, Efrain. Thank you, Efrain. Now let's jump the Pacific, making the big leap over to Hobart, Tasmania, where the RAM Australia chair, Dr. Jenny Kerrison, will tell us more about their program there. We're very pleased to have it with us today, Jenny Kerrison from Hobart, Australia. She is the current chair of the Rotarian Action Group on Malaria in Australia, RAM Australia, and she's a secretary of the RAM Global Board. We know her as Wonder Jenny for all that she does, and I'd like to get an overview of RAM Global, I'd like to get an overview of RAM Australia today, find out how you all work so that we can learn from you and how to make such a great success. You've had so many breakthroughs here recently that it's exciting to have you on the call. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Drake. It's an honor to be with RAM Global Rotary Action Group, and really exciting future for us. So the Rotarians Against Malaria in Australia was established way in early 1990s. And in Australia, Rotary has 19 districts, and RAM is represented in all the 19 districts. So we have 5 countries we look after, and they are Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Timor-Leste, and West Timor. Now, we've been in Papua New Guinea for as long as we've been running as RAM Australia, and in Solomon Islands as well. Now, of the 5 countries, Timor-Leste has the smallest population, and it's very, very close to zero malaria. RAM started work there in 2006, and it has a very well functioning national malaria program, and I think that's plus a highly competent WHO consultant and money, plenty of funds to run the program. So all these 3 factors are exceptionally important. And where Rotarians come in, we help where there are small gaps in funding, or if they need to run a particular activity and they need the money fairly soon. So through Rotarians in Australia, we raise money and we direct it to the 5 countries we look after. Now, more recently, we have started helping West Timor, and this is primarily because the border areas between the 2 countries. So Timor-Leste and West Timor share the same island, and the borders, as with any other borders across the world, international borders, in particular when they share the same landmass, is very porous. And so we now have residual malaria cases at the border areas coming into Timor-Leste, in particular, a little enclave in West Timor itself. So we're working on cross-border malaria elimination on both sides of the country. So West Timor is part of Indonesia, part of what we call NTT province, Indonesia. And as we know, malaria is a disease of poverty. And as we can imagine, in developing countries like West Timor and Timor-Leste, maintaining that financial commitment is not easy. Right. So then in Vanuatu, we are working with them, and we started in 1990s, but has resumed our relationship with them in Vanuatu, and we're working closely with the government and WHO in Vanuatu, and they're pretty close to malaria elimination with annual parasite incidence of 1.7 per thousand. That's very good. And again, they have a good WHO technical advisor, and you know, really busy but active malaria program there. Government is very supportive. Global Fund is there, and Rotarians helping them in the ways we can, and that's exciting for us. So Timor-Leste and Vanuatu are aiming for zero malaria in 2025. So they're part of that WHO E2025 target. So that's exciting. Now, Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea are both have seen increases in malaria, and that's unfortunate. In particular, Solomon Islands, well, both countries, but Solomon Islands did see was close to malaria elimination back in the 1970s. Anyway, right now it's about, I think, 107 per thousand in annual parasite incidents. So that's you know, that's obviously yeah.
Yeah, may I add, so point out here that in the Solomons, it's a classic case of malaria resurging. It was nearly wiped out in the 1970s, as it was in many other countries. Sri Lanka had a couple dozen cases and went back to over 500,000 cases, and now it's back down to zero. Through a lot of what you point out, which is well-organized programs, really focused, and good partners. So what you've consistently done is found really good partners and figured out good plans and gone to execute them. So the Rotarians are not leading the entire program. We're partners. We're part of the extra group that makes it happen there. So with Timor-Leste and Vanuatu, I was reading yesterday that Vanuatu moved up its zero date by 2 years from 2021 to 2023. And that's a really exciting development. Timor-Leste, you said, has not had an indigenous transfer of malaria since 2017, but and that in part is due to the work that Rotarians have done. So would you focus for a moment on how we might get to zero and how you're getting to zero? What do you do that's working so well?
Thank you, Drake. Just one minor correction. Timor-Leste has, in fact, they did get to zero in 2017, in July 2017, but last year, they actually, end of last year or beginning of this year, they did have one local transmission in that enclave in West Timor. So yes, so that puts them back to another 3 years of journey to malaria-free certification by WHO.
You also point out that, so this is an enclave, this is a small area of Timor-Leste that happens to be completely surrounded by West Timor. So
Correct.
the cross-border is one of the key issues that if you could wipe it out of Timor-Leste, which apparently it was for 3+ years, but unless you get the neighboring country taken care of, you're stuck. We need to do West Timor as well as Timor-Leste in order to keep it at 0. So you're prime area for doing cross-border work.
Yeah, so how do we move countries to 0? I can see Timor-Leste, West Timor and Vanuatu achieving 0 malaria fairly soon. So certainly within the WHO target of 2030, the year 2030. And with Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, unfortunately, Solomon Islands, I've read the National Strategic Plan, and I believe they aim for 2030 for malaria elimination. But I think Papua New Guinea will miss the target date. Yeah. Now, one of the programs that is vitally important, double emphasis there, is having community health volunteers at the remote rural locations. So that is what Timor-Leste has done. They upskill their community health volunteers, and that is also what Indonesia is doing. And certainly both countries are trying, all countries are trying very hard, and I don't think it's a matter of one not pulling their weight. And we've got really good relationship with all government. When I say all government, we work directly with 4 countries and their government. In contrast with Papua New Guinea, we work mainly with RAM PNG. So, and it's really rewarding to see that we have such a good relationship and mutual respect for us and for the government. It's really rewarding. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm hearing echoes of the same issues that we have in other areas. In Venezuela, it was marked on the map that it had 0 malaria. Now it is the worst in South America, in all of Latin America, where they have 500,000 cases. The same thing happened in Sri Lanka. At the turn of the century, they had just a few dozen cases, but then that spiked up and then it came back down. In the Solomon Islands. So we're learning how, when we get these resurgences, how to take it down. But like you say, the best solution is to get it out of there completely right now. And the political will that the Rotarians provided for polio is one of the big lessons that we're providing for malaria. That provide the political will, make sure that we get to 0, and we stay there. And that's absolutely essential. So even the real key player in all of this for the entire, for the Asia Pacific Islands. And you're learning how to do malaria on islands. Take it out of Vanuatu, take it out of West Timor-Leste, and then West Timor, and then expand from there. So.
And Drake, really, really important for Rotarians to be working with the government. I think Rotarians sometimes believe they can go into a country and do what they want, but that's so wrong. We must work with the government and through the government. And if the government is a little bit not so easy to work with, well, we just have to keep persevering. And we can't, I think we can't just rush in and try and save the world, because we can't.
Looking forward to working with you this coming year on a lot of different projects. Thank you for being such a terrific role model.
Thank you, Drake.
We're thrilled that you joined us in this round the world tour of malaria work by Rotarians. As you can see, there are several exciting breakthroughs, from vaccines to being on the ground able to take malaria to 0. What you can do right now is join RAM Global. Just go to www.ram-global.org and become a member. On the website, you'll find more ways to become involved individually, with your club, your district, and even join a grant when the time comes. Thank you so much for taking your time to learn more about malaria. We look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in the future.